Did you seriously post that? I stared at her in disbelief, my voice barely above a whisper, my phone trembling in my hand. The screen still glowed with the buzz it post. My handwriting, my thoughts, my secrets, blown wide open with a smug caption. Some people have way too many feelings and zero chill. Enjoy this train wreck of a diary. I was standing outside the university library, the afternoon sun cutting sharp golden lines on the pavement. Moments earlier, I'd been walking out of my shift at the tutoring center, sipping a vanilla latte, feeling halfway decent about my day. Now, my entire soul felt stripped bare in public. A few students passed me, eyes glued to their phones, stifling laughter. I knew. They'd read it. And she, Amber Hartley, stood just a few steps away from the fountain, leaning against her Jeep like she'd won some twisted game. I wasn't always someone people noticed. My name's Alina, 28, quiet by nature and more comfortable behind a notebook than in front of a crowd. I've always been one of those people others forget in a room, not because I lacked presence, but because I never demanded it. I believed in kindness, keeping to myself, and letting others shine. And for the most part, that worked, until I met Brielle. Brielle was the opposite of me in every way. She was dazzling, like sunlight turned into a person. Blonde hair that seemed to glow even under fluorescent lights, a voice that carried through rooms, and the kind of laughter that made everyone want to be in on the joke. I met her in our sophomore year of college, when we were randomly assigned as roommates. She burst into the dorm with 3 suitcases, a designer handbag, and a phone already buzzing with group chat notifications. I was sitting on my bed with a box of journals stacked neatly beside me. "Hey, I'm Brielle. You must be quiet," she'd said, laughing. "Don't worry, I'll bring you out of that shell." At the time, I thought she meant well. Our friendship, or whatever strange, unbalanced thing we had, began then. She was magnetic, and somehow I ended up orbiting around her. At first, it was flattering. She'd introduce me as her Zen friend, or my little poet, and I'd chuckle, always playing the background to her spotlight. She said I grounded her. I started thinking maybe that was my role, to balance her chaos. We moved in together after graduation. Brielle got a flashy job in PR at a fashion firm. I worked at a local bookstore and tutored high school students in the evenings. My salary was modest, but I loved what I did. My world was filled with the smell of old paper, soft-spoken conversations, and the rustling of pages. Hers was selfies, high heels, and a calendar booked with rooftop parties. Despite our differences, I wrote about her often. Writing had always been my anchor. I kept journals, real ones. Not digital or password-protected apps. Actual leather-bound books filled with raw, unfiltered thoughts. My fears, hopes, wounds, and longings spilled into those pages like a sacred confessional. I wrote about growing up invisible in a household where my parents were either fighting or ignoring me. I wrote about the time I lost my brother to an overdose and how I never got to say goodbye. I wrote about Brielle, her dazzling light, and her shadows too. But I never thought she'd read them. Until the night I came home early. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the bookstore closed early for inventory. I walked in through the front door and heard laughter. Not the kind of laughter you share over wine and cheese, but a loud, mocking one. I swear, you guys, listen to this. I think I'm falling in love with someone who will never see me. That was my voice. My words. But spoken by Brielle. I peeked into the living room. She was reading my diary aloud, to 3 of her friends. They sat on the couch like it was stand-up comedy night, wine glasses in hand, giggling over every vulnerable sentence I'd bled onto the page. "She thinks I'm so self-centered," Brielle laughed, reading another part. Sometimes I wonder if Brielle notices how I shrink when she enters a room. Oh my God, she's obsessed with me. I froze. A piece of me shattered in that moment. Not just because she'd broken my trust, but because she was laughing. She'd taken my most private wounds and turned them into a joke. When I finally walked in, silence fell like a guillotine. "Oh, hey, Alina, we were just..." Brielle started, her smile faltering. I didn't say a word. I turned, walked into my room, and locked the door. I cried for hours. Then I packed my journals and hid them under a floorboard I discovered beneath my closet. I wanted to burn them, but I couldn't. They were the only proof that I existed in a way no one ever saw. For the next few weeks, I stayed quiet. I barely spoke to Brielle. She acted like nothing happened, but I saw the shift. She stopped inviting friends over. She bought me a candle and left it on my desk with a sticky note. Sorry. I didn't acknowledge it. Some wounds need more than wax and lavender. I should have moved out, but the rent was cheap, and I had nowhere else to go. Plus, some foolish part of me still wanted to believe she hadn't meant harm, that she was just careless, not cruel. But then came the diary post. 3 weeks after the reading incident, I got a message from a coworker. Hey, is this you? Attached was a link to a Reddit post titled, "My creepy roommate has a crush on me." Found her diary. It was me. My words. My handwriting scanned and posted. Not just one page, dozens. She'd taken photos of the entries, uploaded them, and blurred only her name, leaving mine and everything else untouched. People were commenting, mocking, diagnosing me, calling me obsessed, crazy, unstable. I couldn't breathe. My world became a kaleidoscope of humiliation and fury. I confronted her the next morning, trembling with rage. "You posted my diary," I said quietly. My voice shook. Brielle didn't deny it. She just raised her eyebrows, cool as ever. "It was anonymous. No one knows it's you." I wanted to scream, but instead, I stared at her, harder than I ever had. "You knew it was me. You knew people would guess." Her smile thinned. "Maybe you shouldn't write such weird things about people you live with." I realized then, she didn't feel guilty. She felt justified. That night, I sat in the dark with one of my hidden journals and reread a page I'd written the year my brother died. They always tell you grief is loud, but mine was silent and invisible, like me. I was done being invisible. The next day, I called out of work. I spent the morning researching HR protocol, online privacy laws, and social consequences for posting someone's personal property without consent. I printed the Reddit post. I gathered screenshots. I documented every part of the story. I was methodical, controlled,
calm.
But my real revenge, my ace, was something else entirely. Because Brielle had a secret too. One she never imagined I knew. See, in our second year living together, she asked me to help her set up a budget spreadsheet on her laptop. She didn't know how to use Excel, and I offered to build her a simple monthly tracker. In the process, she gave me access to a folder titled HR and Payroll. I never opened it, never cared. But she'd never revoked access either. And inside that folder was a pay stub. Brielle's salary, bonuses, and a breakdown of every luxury she flaunted were there in black and white. Her online persona screamed six-figure influencer. But the truth? She was making barely $42,000 a year, heavily in debt. Most of her designer clothes were bought on Klarna or borrowed through rental subscriptions. She lived on image. I never cared before.
But now?
It was time to even the playing field. I didn't post anything yet. Instead, I crafted a very subtle response. I created an anonymous Medium article titled, "When Image Becomes Everything and Truth is the Price." I embedded screenshots of blurred-out versions of the same pay stub with financial literacy tips. I never used her name, but I tagged key terms I knew she followed: PR industry, NYC branding life, finance behind fashion. The article went semi-viral among industry insiders. Then I shared it quietly with a few of her professional contacts under a burner account. The whispers began. Within 2 weeks, I watched Brielle's social media start to change. She went from daily outfit of the day posts to recycled selfies and vague captions about authenticity. Her comment sections shrank. The invitations to exclusive events slowed. She started noticing me again. But this time, I wasn't orbiting her. I had my own gravity now. I had been silent for days. Not a word. Not a clapback. Not even a post on social media. I watched her smirk in the hallways, flipping her sleek black hair as if she'd won. Her little stunt with my diary had gone viral. The diary girl, They called me at work. My private heartbreaks, my most vulnerable confessions, read aloud on TikTok with her sarcastic voice and that damned background music. But what no one knew, what she didn't know, is that while she was busy laughing at my trauma, I was pulling strings. Because here's the thing, when you work in HR for 3 years and get promoted to payroll analyst, you see everything. And I never misused that access. Not once.
Until now.
It all started with one question I asked myself, over and over. Why would someone post another woman's diary online? The answer? Because they never imagined you'd bite back. It wasn't revenge I wanted, not in the beginning. I just wanted her to delete it, to apologize. But she didn't.
She leaned in.
She reveled in the attention, made merch with quotes from my diary, and sold them on Etsy. One of the quotes was, "I'm always the one who cares too much." She had stitched that onto a mug.
A mug.
That was the moment something in me snapped. I started quietly, pulling her name up in the payroll system. I knew what to look for. The bonus categories. The time-off records. The discrepancies. It didn't take long. 4 months earlier, she'd reported overtime. Unapproved and unlogged, but got paid anyway. It wasn't just unprofessional. It was fraudulent. She had claimed she'd worked 16 hours on a Sunday when our office is closed. Claimed she was responding to a system outage. But I had the IT logs. There was no outage. I printed the file. Then I printed her most recent pay stub. There it was, coded under OT Special Approval. An extra $1,742.16. I tucked it into a yellow envelope. On the outside, I wrote in neat capital letters, "Still want to talk about secrets?" I didn't post it right away. No, I wanted a moment. And it came faster than I thought. It was the company's quarterly town hall. Everyone gathered in the big conference room. Lights dimmed, CEO ready to announce promotions. As fate would have it, she was emceeing. Still smiling, still smug. I sat 3 rows back.
Calm.
Focused. My hands were steady. She was mid-sentence, bragging about her recent mental health awareness campaign, hypocrisy at its peak, when I slipped out and made my move. In the lobby, I approached the large bulletin board next to the break room, the one everyone passed on their way to coffee. I taped the envelope to the corkboard. Next to it, I pinned a printout of her Etsy store page, complete with my diary quotes. Then below that, I posted her pay stub. I redacted her address and account info, but left the overtime line clear. I could have gone nuclear. Could have reported her to compliance or the CFO. But this was personal. Poetic. By the time I returned to the room, whispers were already starting. A colleague leaned over to her and whispered something. She paused on stage. Her face froze. And I watched in real time as her expression changed from queen bee confidence to cold sweat panic. She knew. She must have seen it during a break. And then she spotted me. Her eyes narrowed. "What did you do?" she mouthed across the room. I just tilted my head and smiled slightly. The power had shifted. The next morning, HR summoned her. I wasn't in the meeting, of course. That would be a conflict. But I knew what was happening. They would ask her to explain the unauthorized overtime. They would ask why she'd publicly humiliated a coworker using private material. She tried to play victim, I later heard. Said someone hacked my diary. That she was just reading what was already public. But IT traced the source of a leak. Her personal laptop. She'd taken photos of my diary pages while she visited my apartment months ago. Back when we were pretending to be friends. That sealed her fate. Her clearance was revoked by noon. As she walked out that Friday, carrying her box of succulents and framed affirmations, I was sitting in the break room sipping mint tea. I didn't look up until she was steps away. She paused. "You ruined me," she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "You ruined yourself the moment you turned someone's pain into a punchline." She left. And just like that, the air in the office shifted. People stopped whispering when I walked by. My name was no longer a joke. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The morning after I posted Jordan's pay stub on my Instagram story, I expected fireworks. What I didn't expect was how fast they'd start. By 8 a.m., my phone was vibrating nonstop. Notifications, DMs, and missed calls stacked one after another. I opened Instagram and saw that my post had been viewed over 20,000 times. It had already been reshared by meme pages, college gossip accounts, and even a financial advice blogger. The caption I wrote had been simple. Since privacy's a joke, here's what the queen of public exposure makes at her job. You're welcome. It hit harder than I expected. And it wasn't just strangers watching. Mutual friends, classmates, and coworkers had all seen it. That's when Jordan called. Not texted. Not messaged.
Called.
Something she never did anymore. I let it ring.
Twice.
3 times. Then I picked up, calm as stone. What the actual hell? Ava? She screamed the second I said hello. I didn't even flinch. Oh hey, Jordan. I was wondering when you'd get around to calling. You posted my pay stub?
Yeah.
Just like you posted my entire diary. Pages, Jordan. Pages. She was quiet for a second. Then she tried a different tactic. You don't understand the damage you've done. People from my job saw it. This could cost me everything. I closed my laptop slowly. My heart was calm, almost disturbingly so. That's how I felt when you posted my diary. That was my everything. But unlike your paycheck, those words came from my soul. Her voice cracked, but she kept pushing. You've always been so dramatic. It wasn't that deep. You should have just asked me to take it down. This is malicious, Ava. Dramatic. I laughed, sharp and bitter. You think it's dramatic to defend my life? You aired out my trauma, my therapy notes, my truth, to get attention. You lost the right to label anything I do as dramatic the moment you hit post. She fell silent again. That silence, that guilt-ridden, calculating silence, told me everything. And then came the gaslighting. I only posted it because I was worried about you. People needed to know what you were really going through. I blinked slowly. Jordan, you added laughing emojis. You made polls. You captioned my entries like they were me material. No apology. Just deflection. You don't get it. People found it entertaining. You blew it out of proportion. And there it was. That sentence. I didn't even raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said the words I'd rehearsed 100 times since the betrayal. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. And now that the internet knows what your check looks like, you feel exposed, vulnerable, humiliated. I took a breath. Welcome to my world. She hung up, but that wasn't the end. That was just day 1. By day 3, her name was trending locally. People started posting side-by-sides, my blurred-out diary pages next to screenshots of her pay stub. Comment sections were divided. Some thought we were both petty, others called it poetic justice. A few even dug into her employer's business and began a dialogue about wage transparency. Unexpected allies started emerging. Then came the text from her cousin, Mia. Hey, I know things are messy, but I just wanted to say, I saw what happened. I had no idea she did that to you. I'm on your side. I paused, rereading it twice. Mia was Jordan's ride or die for years. For her to shift loyalty like this? That was massive. I responded with a cautious, thanks. That means more than you know. A few hours later, I got a DM from another girl, Kayla, someone who also used to be close with Jordan. She did something similar to me. Screenshotted private messages, twisted them to make me look unstable, and shared them in a group chat. I thought I was alone. My jaw clenched. It was a pattern. And none of us had connected the dots until now. Jordan was unraveling, and people were noticing. She posted a shaky Instagram story 2 days later, bare-faced, voice cracking, trying to play the victim. I've been cyberbullied for days. This is why women don't support each other. Except comments were turned off. And every friend she tagged had either unfollowed her or posted vague, accountability stories. And I stayed silent. Not out of guilt, but because I didn't need to say more. My truth had already spoken. Then came the email. From our university's Student Ethics Committee. Apparently, They'd been forwarded screenshots of my diary excerpts, and Jordan's posts had broken several codes of conduct regarding cyber harassment and public bullying. They requested a formal meeting with both of us. I showed up on time, crisp shirt, tied back hair, with a printed folder of everything, her posts, the timestamps, my original diary entries, with my therapist's note of permission, and a brief statement. Jordan arrived 12 minutes late, sunglasses on, no documents, and reeking of panic. The panel didn't need long. She was stripped of her student mentor status, barred from organizing any public campus events for a year, and given a formal warning. I left that room lighter. But the best part? The committee thanked me for showing resilience, for documenting everything professionally, for demonstrating maturity in the face of personal violation. Later that week, Jordan showed up at my favorite cafe. She didn't order anything, just stood by the counter, waiting for me to notice her. I almost didn't, but eventually I walked over. "You have 1 minute," I said. She looked like a ghost of herself, pale, fidgety, eyes sunken. Asterisk, asterisk. I just wanted to say, I didn't think it would go this far. I never thought I'd lose everything over a stupid post. I waited. 1 beat.
2.
"That's the difference between us," I finally said. "You posted to entertain. I posted to educate." She opened her mouth to speak again, but I raised my hand. "And Jordan, you didn't lose everything. You just lost the illusion that you could keep hurting people without consequences." I left her standing there. I didn't feel cruel. I felt clean. Like I'd finally wiped away the years of silence I had endured. Years of being talked over, written about, laughed at, dissected. My pain had been turned into entertainment.
But now?
My power was something no one could touch. At home, I lit a candle, the same lavender one my grandmother used to burn when we sat together and talked about boundaries. I opened a fresh journal. This time, not for venting, but for vision. On the first page, I wrote, "This isn't revenge. This is reclamation." Then I closed it, locked it in a drawer, and went to bed with no fear of it ever being read aloud again. After the post went viral, everything changed, but not in the chaotic, scorched earth way I might have once imagined. Surprisingly, it was quieter than expected, and the quiet was what scared her the most. Jenna didn't reach out right away. Not when her coworkers saw the post. Not when HR called her in. Not even when her supervisor started auditing her time cards. It was almost like she thought if she ignored it, it would all vanish. But it didn't. And neither did I. I stayed calm. For once, I was the eye in the storm she created. Her silence wasn't power anymore, it was avoidance. And mine wasn't weakness, it was control. About a week later, I got a message. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a full sentence. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a while before responding. I wasn't sure why I agreed. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe, deep down, a part of me wanted to see if she had even the slightest bit of remorse. We met in the same coffee shop we used to hang out in before everything soured. The moment I walked in, she stood up, too quickly, like her guilt had been pressing down on her spine for days. Her eyes looked hollow. The confidence she used to wear like armor was gone. She looked small. "I messed up," she said quickly, as if ripping off a band-aid. "What I did was wrong. I thought I was being funny. I thought it was harmless. But I crossed a line." I just sipped my tea and waited. She fidgeted, her hands twisting in her lap. "They put me on probation at work," she finally said, her voice shaking. "I might lose my job." I could feel the weight of those words, but I didn't flinch. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just listened. "You embarrass me publicly," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You turned my most vulnerable thoughts into entertainment. For what? Likes? Retweets?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't realize how deep it went for you. I didn't think you'd ever see it. That's the problem, Jenna. You never think beyond yourself." She broke down crying right there in that cafe. And even though I had every right to turn my back on her, I didn't. I didn't do it for her. I did it for me. Because revenge got me justice, but forgiveness was how I'd get peace. I'm not here to destroy you, I said. I could have posted more than just your pay stub, but I didn't. That was your warning. Her eyes widened. She didn't realize how much restraint I'd actually shown. I continued. What happens next is up to you. You can learn from this or keep playing the victim. But I'm done cleaning up your messes. She nodded. I understand. I do. And I'm sorry. I didn't say I forgive you. Not yet. Because forgiveness, like trust, isn't instant. It's earned. After that, something strange happened. Other people started messaging me. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years. People who had stayed silent when Jenna humiliated me. Some apologized for not standing up for me. Others shared their own experiences, times they'd been betrayed, shamed, or humiliated by someone they trusted. One message stood out. It was from an old college friend, Leah, who wrote, "Your strength gave me the courage to confront someone who's been manipulating me for years. Thank you." That one message made it all worth it. Because this wasn't just about me and Jenna anymore. This was about every quiet person who had ever had their voice stolen. A week later, I saw Lisa again, my mentor from the bookstore. We hadn't seen each other in a while, but when I walked in, she looked up with a knowing smile. "I saw the post," she said. "And I saw how you handled the aftermath." I smiled sheepishly. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." "But you didn't run from it either," she said. "You stood up. And you kept your dignity." She handed me a wrapped package. Inside was a leather-bound journal with gold-tipped pages. "New diary?" Asked with a smirk. "New chapter," she said. That night, I wrote for hours. Not about pain, not about Jenna, not even about the revenge. I wrote about healing, about how sometimes you don't realize how powerful you are until someone tries to break you. I wrote about boundaries, about kindness with strength, and about the kind of peace that comes not when your enemy suffers, but when you simply stop carrying them inside your heart. I was still me, but different, lighter, stronger,
Whole.
Weeks passed. Jenna kept her job, but barely. The office was different now. People watched her with wary eyes. She wasn't the queen bee anymore. She was just Jenna. And in that space, others began to rise. One of them was Marcy, an intern who used to be terrified of speaking up in meetings. She told me quietly one day, "When you stood up for yourself, it made me realize I could too." That meant more to me than revenge ever could. I realized something then. The best revenge isn't ruining someone. It's rebuilding yourself so beautifully that they have to sit back and watch you thrive in the life they once tried to dim. Jenna's actions exposed her character. But my response? That revealed mine. I donated the ad revenue from the viral post to a mental health charity that supports cyberbullying survivors. I didn't announce it. I didn't need applause. It was just right. For every person who'd ever had their private thoughts made public. For every diary exposed. For every soul betrayed. And mostly for me. Because healing was never about making her feel worse. It was about finally feeling whole again. 3 months later, the air finally felt different. Lighter. As if all the invisible weight I'd been dragging around for years, grief, humiliation, betrayal, had finally been lifted. It was early morning, the sun casting soft amber tones across my apartment floor. I sat cross-legged on the balcony, sipping a cup of chamomile tea, watching the world come alive beneath me. I'd moved. Not out of fear, but out of choice. My old place held too many echoes of the pain I'd lived through, the whisper of torn pages, the ghosts of old diary entries, the memory of betrayal. I found a modest one-bedroom in a quiet corner of the city, surrounded by trees and bird chatter. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. Entirely mine. And peaceful. The day after I posted Lauren's pay stub, things spiraled quickly, for her, not for me. She tried to control the narrative, of course. Claimed I'd hacked her files. Claimed I'd invaded her privacy. Funny how the truth always sounds like a violation to someone used to living a lie. But the court didn't see it her way. She'd breached a string of privacy violations herself by posting my personal writings, and the judge made that very clear. I didn't even have to fight too hard. my diary entries, her admission in text messages, and witness accounts of her bragging were enough to turn the tide. Her employer got involved. HR launched an internal investigation. Apparently, leaking someone else's personal data online violated their social conduct policy. She was asked to resign a week later. And she did. Quietly. Ashamed. I never heard her voice again. Some said she moved away. Others said she stayed but stopped showing her face online. I didn't care either way. My life was no longer wrapped around the need to monitor hers. I had things to build. My therapy sessions had grown less frequent. Not because I didn't value them, God, I did. But because I was finally stabilizing. I was learning how to forgive myself for trusting the wrong people. I was learning that boundaries are not just fences, they're forms of self-respect. And most importantly, I was learning to be okay with letting go of the people who were never sorry for hurting me. One morning, while cleaning, I stumbled upon something I hadn't seen in months, my diary. The real one. Not the shattered, publicly dissected version. This one was in a zipped pouch I kept hidden under the couch lining. I held it in my hands like a fragile newborn. There were dried tears on some of the pages. Smudged ink. Hasty, angry handwriting. Some entries were sweet. Some were raw. Some were downright painful. But every word was mine. My truth. I lit a white candle, sat down on the floor, and read through the pages one by one. Some made me laugh. Some made my throat close. But when I reached the last page I had written before everything imploded, I smiled. The entry ended with, "Someday, I'll write about this and feel proud of how far I've come." That someday was today. Later that week, I got an invitation to speak at a community wellness event, ironically hosted by the same mental health nonprofit that Lauren used to sponsor. Apparently, my story had made rounds in some advocacy circles, and they wanted someone who understood digital boundaries, emotional recovery, and modern empowerment. I hesitated, then said yes. I stood on that stage a month later, heart pounding under soft lights, looking out at a crowd of about 100 people, mostly women, some young, some older, all with stories written on their faces. I began with a line that had once been weaponized against me. My name is Rima, and yes, I kept a diary. A few people chuckled. A few nodded. I told them how my private thoughts were turned into public entertainment. I told them how humiliation can either crush you or carve you into something stronger. I told them about revenge, but more importantly, I told them about recovery. Afterward, a girl, barely 16, approached me with teary eyes. "My sister posted my poetry online to embarrass me," she whispered. I took her hand. "Write more," I told her. "Write until you own the words again." There's something sacred about surviving and then reaching back for others. That's how healing spreads. Not just through justice, but through grace. I started writing again, not in a private diary, but publicly. I launched a small blog. Pages They Can't Burn. It caught on.
Fast.
People from all over started submitting their stories of betrayal, of redemption, of finding their voice again. It wasn't a business. It was a movement. I hired an old friend from college, Lena, as an editor. She'd once been embarrassed by a toxic ex who posted screenshots of her messages. Now she was curating others' pain into power. We printed our first community zine 2 months ago. It sold out in 48 hours. I thought of my grandmother a lot during this time. Her voice came to me sometimes when I was quiet, when I was journaling or chopping vegetables at dusk or folding laundry. Don't let your pain stay pain. Turn it into prayer. She'd said that to me after my first breakup. It stuck more now than ever. And as strange as it sounds, I sometimes thanked Lauren in my head, not for what she did, but for what she accidentally helped me build. Without that betrayal, I might have never unlocked this version of myself. The one who doesn't hide. The one who shares. The one who leads. Revenge can look like chaos. But healing? Healing is quiet and unstoppable. One Sunday, as autumn made its entrance and the leaves began their slow golden dance, I hosted a tea party in my small garden. The women from my writing circle came, some nervous, some excited. all beautifully broken in their own ways. We sat on cushions under string lights. We sipped cardamom tea. We read stories aloud. Mine ended with a line I'd been saving for a while. "You can burn my pages, but you'll never erase my voice." They clapped. They cried. And I smiled, not as a victim, not even as a victor, but as someone free. That night, as I cleaned up the mugs and folded the blankets, I paused to look at the sky. It was clear, almost glassy, like a mirror turned upward. I whispered softly, "I'm okay now." And for the first time in years, I meant every word.